intelligence, according to Daniel Goleman, when you are talking about self-awareness, what does it mean? For me, it would mean it's a kind of going into yourself, communicating with yourself to read, I would say to discover the message which has been put in you when you are sent here on earth. We can take this as a starting point, by the way. Starting point, when you were sent, you were given a mission. This word mission, from Latin word saying mittere, to send. You are sent. And by being sent, you are given certain mission to fulfill. But once you are in this universe, once you are in this planet, sometimes that mission got forgotten. Because you start facing challenges, and every challenge, every person coming to you, he's adding his own mission to yours. And at a certain moment, you find yourself not knowing, not even being aware that you have a mission. And you carry on the business, not your business, but some, what I may call ghosts. You have many ghosts within you. And when you are doing the business, you are carrying on the mission of one or some of those ghosts. To give you an example, when you are in our education system, the teacher will give you how you need to conduct your life. He will give you some instruction. He will give you some mission. Your parents, they'll give you the mission. And when those people are the ones who are taking care of you, they love you. And sometimes we end up by carrying on the mission of those groups we belong to. And because there are so many, they are so confusing, they construct what I'm calling ghosts and make a kind of noise within you. Now, this self-awareness, it is that aspect of being able to differentiate those ghosts which are new and picking that one which is yours. And once you have it, then you are motivated. You are motivated to go and conquer the universe. And this is the second component of emotional intelligence. You are motivated because you are carrying on your mission, which would be different if you were carrying on someone else's mission. It is confused. It is sometimes you are not sure. You are not today I want to motivate you, and then tomorrow you are tired, and so. But when it is yours, you are energized. You are motivated. And then when you start conquering the universe, when you start conquering your environment, this is where social skills are important. Because you are conquering a universe which is full of people. And some people would need to be dealt with. And you want them to be as much as possible your allies. Nevertheless, you will face also challenges. And when you send that communication, when you originate that communication through what you do, through what you say, through your behavior, there is a kind of reaction going back to you. And that reaction, the way you deal it, this is where self-regulation comes in. How do you respond to a negative or to a non-constructive reaction? This, the fourth component of emotional intelligence comes in. You regulate yourself. You don't react. You respond calmly. You control yourself. And also when you are receiving, there's this aspect of having empathy. Those who need you, they will send you a certain communication, and the way you respond, the empathy is so important. So, my friend Joshua, to say how this emotional intelligence is so important in business, if we limit ourselves to those money-making organizations, imagine if we were to have a group of 10 employees within a business, and everyone has discovered his purpose, his mission, and you are together. You have one goal within your organization with the business, and everyone's motivated. Everyone has social skills. You can do miracle within the business. And maybe the last part of the question, how to differentiate person with high IQ. I would say a leader or any person, for me, it is the same. How to differentiate them? Again, you look at how they communicate and what they communicate about. Briefly, you look at the emotions. Some people, when they're communicating, especially in private organization, may have a person, because he's the founder, because he's the owner of his business, the way of communicating is to give orders, to be angry at people who have made mistake. That person, you can say, has a good EQ, and you would see the consequence on his organization. People will be leaving. There are some others who would communicate through what I can call fear. And they are communicating. Instead of inspiring confidence, they are spreading, within this period of COVID, for example. This year you can see some people with a good EQ and those who have a lower one. COVID is becoming a kind of paranoia. And people are discussing only about how many are dead, how many are sick. You talking about the death. A person with high EQ will be mainly discussing about life. We'll be discussing about constructive things, despite whatever the environment may be presenting. So this is what I can say on this point. Back to you, Joshua.
Wow, that was a very good and comprehensive way of putting it. I believe that you've tried to summarize for us what EQ is and the components of EQ and how a single person can live or grow or exude emotional intelligence abilities. Now, Angela, I'd like to give you a chance as well to let us into your perspective, or in addition to what Venu said. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Let me begin by saying I'm delighted to be here on Speaker's Pulse this evening to talk about a subject that I believe is necessary for anybody and everybody, from teenagers all the way to 80, 90-year-olds, because it is something that's not just geared to how we perform in an organization. Emotional intelligence is a way of being, and it's such a critical way of being and a way to live life if you are to coexist successfully with other human beings. So Venus has really painted the landscape very well for us. And I like that he has expanded the view of business, not only to cover the profit-making entities, but to cover the organization. So whether the organization is a ministry in the government, or whether the organization is one that is geared towards social impact. And emotional intelligence comes into play in whichever aspect, because an organization is a collection of human beings. What does this collection look like? You, Joshua, came into this earth born with certain traits, and in the process of interacting in your very early years, have also been nurtured to see life in a particular way. And so your views, your judgments, your lens through which you see life has been informed by many forces. Now you're going to work in an organization as somebody else whose life view, whose religious convictions, whose way of expression and communication has been shaped primarily by their home, their parents, their family, and the schools that they attended. So you will see already potentially the organization is a rich pot of humanity. The diversity is great, but this diversity can be explosive if we do not learn how to manage our emotions, such that if we're sitting in a team, in an organization, and we're working towards a project, Joshua thinks we should go through this route. I have a different opinion. Emotional intelligence tells you that it is okay. We both have a right to be heard. And that if Joshua's view wins the majority vote of the team, then we go ahead with it. So emotional intelligence is really a way of coexisting with other human beings. Is it important? Absolutely. And not just in the organization. Venusta already illustrated for us, individually in your homes. Emotional intelligence, because it's underpinned by communication, is the make or break of many relationships. Spouse with spouse, parents with children, children with their siblings. So indeed, it is a very, very important way of being. I don't even see it as a skill. It goes beyond the skill. It's really a way of being, a way of conducting yourself, a way of experiencing life in the understanding that others' ways are also different. And that rather than react to people who express themselves differently, who don't share our convictions, whether they're religious, political, or otherwise, I am able to step back and respect the fact that that's how you see it as Joshua, or that's how you express yourself as Venus, and it is well. Then that way, in the organization, we're able to tap into the diversity, that rich wealth of the various individuals coming in with all their inputs, their talents, and capabilities.
Again, thank you so much for giving us a broad sense of emotional intelligence. And you've also reminded us that emotional intelligence is way beyond the limitation of a single skill. Because as we've been talking about for the last sessions we've had, it's difficult to exhaust it and say, okay, I've put a pulse on it. It's a simple skill as maybe active listening, or we could talk about public speaking, and even then, soft skills. The challenge in the soft skills industry is that the measurability is a challenge. But EQ is like the mother, if I can borrow that, like the mother of all key skills or soft skills that you can find, and the illusion that you can know it in one form is one that can be deceitful. But thank you so much for painting that. Now I want to get back to you, Angela. How could you speak more into how you tell a leader or a person that has a high IQ over a person that has low IQ?
Absolutely, Joshua. I think anybody who has worked in an organization for a period of 2 years or more has been treated to the kind of leader who, when you make mistakes, will be yelling across many offices now, especially the private sector, have gone into the open plan, right? So maybe with the exception of the managing director or the HR director whose office, they require locked spaces for confidentiality. Many of us are now sitting in the office space where I can hear conversations from everywhere. The emotionally unintelligent leader is the one who, when you make a mistake, will be yelling across from where they're seated, yelling across and calling you names and saying, how could you make such a stupid mistake? Forgetting one of the basic tenets of leadership: praise in public, reprimand in private. So that's one clear sign of that leader who, every time they're angered, they don't choose their moments. What we forget as leaders is you're only as good as your followers. So any leader who's there calling their people and saying, I've got useless people, and I've worked with people like that, and my challenge has always been, you're as good as your team. So why do you call your people useless? that's the finger pointing back at you, because you are charged having the capacity to lead. So if you got useless people and they're still at useless, could you be the biggest useless factor in this equation? So again, emotionally unintelligent leaders will fly off the handle. And I'll say it's a journey. When I look at my earlier journey as a manager, in fact, I remember when I got into senior management, I had not been prepared. And I came into an organization to create a complete turnaround in the structure of that organization. And, when I look back, I can see so many opportunities where I could have done it differently. But I thank God somewhere along the way, I became more emotionally intelligent. And it's the reason why I then say emotional intelligence, it's a lifelong journey. You'll see how you develop as an individual from your 20s to your 30s, 30s to your 40s and onwards. And every time it's just life giving you the opportunity. Broaden your view and accommodate other people. Respond rather than react. So those leaders who shout and throw papers, that's tantrum behavior of children. And I can't say that I didn't do it in my time, but you need to keep, the moment you become emotionally intelligent, you ask yourself, this person has really vexed me. If I need to speak with them, there's so many spaces in the office where you can have a private conversation. What joy is there in shaming somebody in the public? Nothing can be gained from it. So that's one aspect. The other aspect of emotionally unintelligent leaders are bullies. The leaders who, if you disagree, so you're in a meeting and you're being told, okay, we need to brainstorm this particular, let me take the customer issue, because customer experience is very close to my heart as a practitioner. So you're coming together with a team to brainstorm, but you've already come with a solution. Now you're very intolerant of the suggestions that are coming from your people. So when anybody suggests something that is different from what you put to the team, you rubbish it. Now that's an intelligent leader. Why did you call for the session? You could have just given the order and let people get on with the work. So again, leaders who are not emotionally intelligent are those who tend not to accept contributions from their teams. They also will not take kindly. There's always somebody in your team who will have the courage, even if you're the shouting kind of leader, to come and tell you, oh, Angela, this is what people feel. And some leaders have been known. I've worked with people who told them, get out of my office. Now you are emotionally unintelligent, because this is a member of your team who cares enough about that vision you're creating for your team or your department to come and tell you, Joshua or Angela or Venus, maybe you need to change your tone or your approach. So again, unintelligent, emotional leaders are those who don't listen to their teams. You cannot succeed as a leader unless your team is contributing to that success.
That's true. That's absolutely true. And I love the way you've brought it closer to our workstations. We all have heard, if you've not had the unfortunate incidents of experiencing yourself, to have a manager or even a coworker that cannot accommodate the ability to accept feedback, the bare minimum of, let's talk about this, how this is not actually right. Let's give an attempt to purge whatever is corrupted, and they all of a sudden become defensive. But some of us have unfortunately had to work with managers who simply say, my order is my order, and the rest of it is rubbish. Whatever you say, I'm not going to hear it. Do as I told you. And that somehow stifles growth in many aspects, as we shall see. I'd like to, again, welcome each and everyone that is part of this conversation. I can see people like R.I.K. Thank you so much, Lydia. You're saying thank you to Venus, I think, for the prior conversation we had. We also had Benjamin Navana, who says powerful message from Mr. Venus. I like to encourage each one of us. If you have any question, if you have any comments, please drop it into the chat so that we can continue the conversation. We know that YouTube has not put an opportunity for a way for you to voice your opinion, at least say, and we hear you, but you can chat, you can write, you can leave a message, and then we'll be able to read your message, so that you get your voice to be heard into this wonderful conversation. I can see Edgar who says that indeed EI is a lifelong journey. So if you're just joining in, you're right in time. We were just addressing the first question that asked, is there any, how do you tell an emotionally intelligent person from an emotionally intelligent, I beg your pardon. And we had a good chance to hear from both panelists as they give us a take on how you could define, you could tell in simple terms what emotional intelligence is. Again, feel free to drop it in the chat what you think is the definition according to you or your understanding of emotional intelligence. But there's also a question in the chat that says, have you met a leader with low IQ or sorry, EQ? And please tell us about the situation. So feel free to tell us more about a leader that you've probably served under, or a colleague that you've worked with and you felt this one really needed to be part of this conversation so they could learn a thing or two about EQ. Now, as we transition, I'd like to ask my second question to you, Venus, maybe starting with you again. Is there a real financial implication on a company with a leader or employees with low EQ? And if yes, how much is that? And maybe if you could focus, I mean, feel free to broaden it as well. I was going to limit you, but feel free to broaden it. What are the costs of low EQ?
Okay, thank you, Joshua. The second part may be hard because I don't think I have done any survey or I'm aware of any survey conducted to quantify the implication of low EQ within an organization. But from my observation and from what a person, anyone may observe based on the definition we gave about EQ, can 100% be sure that there is sure implication financially. Imagine let's take the case Angela was talking about, a manager or a team leader who calls for a meeting to gather ideas from his team, but he has fixed the decision already. What would be the behavior of his team? His team, day one, they will provide the ideas. But day two, some would start just to listen. And they would just put ears that they may not hear. And within an organization, a business company, it's a series of processes, and each process has implication on the final outcome. And if we decide to measure the outcome of an organization in terms of finance, we understand how, by stopping some members of your team to contribute, how the outcome will be affected. And remember that when you have those people within the organization, in any case, they will have to get their salaries. So at the end of the month, they are being paid, they're getting their allowance and so on, but their contribution is being small because of a poor leader, because of a leader with a low EQ. So for sure, the implication can go to bankruptcy. I worked for a company which, at a certain moment, I decided to leave and later wanted to go to bankrupt. Okay, some of you know it, Rwandatel. It is a former telecom company which was privatized, and then later on it got into some issues. But if you look at what happened, it's not because they didn't have the right technology. It's not because the engineers or the managers they had, it's not because they have attended low qualified schools. No. But the reason, for instance, I have decided to leave, it's not because I had the small salary or whatever, but the ambience, the climate within was to some extent not encouraging to take initiative. And you can do survey and you identify many companies which are going downhill because of the leaders with poor EQ.
So clearly there is a cost that at almost each level of the organization, if people do not give the 100% best, either in terms of what they are losing directly because they are not engaged, or even what they could gain because they are working at full capacity. Angela, you nodded your head like you thought that was actually true.
Absolutely, Joshua. I cannot agree with Venuste more. There is a cost. If we look at a survey that Gallup is an American analytics and advisory company based in Washington, D.C. And this is a challenge to us in Africa. We need to start mining our own data that talks to us in our own economic realities. But Gallup did conduct a survey in 2016. And what this survey was looking at is employee engagement, because there is a reason why roles are created in an organization, irrespective of what the mission of that organization is. So whether it's a government ministry, whether it's a private entity, profit-making, or whether it's an organization that is pursuing a social impact agenda, there are specific roles in that organization, which is why then the roles are matched to individuals, which then says that the organization has realized for it to meet its corporate goal, these number of people in finance, in HR, in the frontline administration, in IT have to work together. Now, employee engagement means people not only coming to work, this is a majority of us, even during this pandemic, working from home, are still spending the biggest numbers of our waking hours at work, right? So engaged employees are those who wake up feeling that there's a contribution they're making to this organization. Engaged employees will not sit and wait for you as their manager or team leader or departmental head to come up with the problems. They will suggest solutions to the problems. So let me bring this again as a person who's headed customer experience functions. The front line is always taking the heat for everything that is not working in the back office. So if the payment system is not, for example, if the team in finance is not adhering to the conformance standards or operations in IT, the people at the front get called all sorts of names. When you have disengaged employees, these are the employees where when customers express their anger and frustration, rather than looking at, this week I've dealt with 5 customers complaining about this particular thing, it's tied to our process. Let me forward this. Let me go and have a chat with our team leader. Let me then escalate this to the manager. Disengaged employees, the customer is talking to them and calling them all sorts of names. They've moved their minds mentally. And customers can tell this. A customer knows when you're actively listening to them and when you're just sitting there, counting all your debts, thinking about your holiday one day when the COVID pandemic ends. So those disengaged employees forget that when a customer has a bad experience, they make it their job to tell the world. Think about it, Joshua. When you've had a bad or very disappointing experience, you never even stop to think that, hey, this is my airtime on my phone that I'm using. I'll call you, you'll be talking to me about how you received such bad service from your mobile telephone company. Then you'll be talking to your brother or your wife later on in the day. So the currency of that bad experience gathers momentum. But employees who are engaged will even come and say, at the bare minimum, I am so sorry for this. They're not going to blame anybody else. They will then say, please allow me today to investigate this issue. I will call you. And they go ahead and fulfill the promises. So there is an immediate and direct cost to organizations as a result of low EQ. And I'm talking here about low EQ, not only on the part of leaders and managers, but also employees, because they stop to listen to the public if you're in a state organization serving the public, or they stop to listen to the public if these are paying customers, or they stop to listen to the stakeholders if they are working in social impact organizations. And it is real. It is a very real cost. And we also see it in terms of customer attrition. You start off the year, you've got X number of customers. If you're in a mobile service telephony company, so maybe under a particular customer segment, if you're looking at the customers who are bundled under the pay-as-you-go, so they buy the airtime, they don't get a monthly bill, and you begin to notice an attrition, right? So you're not seeing a movement from pay-as-you-go into the ones that are billed at the end of the month. These are leaving your business. It's time to really stop and ask yourself, to what extent have our people as employees, and to what extent have our leaders contributed to this? Because remember, people cannot give what they don't have. So if as a leader, you're not giving your team respect, motivation, encouragement to solve problems, when they are dealing with customers, they won't be giving them those things either. So the total impact is customer attrition. And we know it takes up to 7 times to acquire one customer, whereas you could cross-sell and upsell to the same customer if you just were emotionally intelligent and treated them right.
Thank you so much, Angela, for bailing me out on your conclusion, because people were both on the chat and on WhatsApp are saying, what about if you look at it from this angle of what is there to gain from being having higher emotional intelligence, as opposed to talking about the cost? But I guess they go hand in hand. What you lose is what you gain. When you have high EQ, there's so much more to gain. And if you have low IQ, there's a cost to that, which is all that we've discussed on this platform already. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your wonderful views. We have a few questions that are coming in. First, from Yamuremye Eugene says, thanks for the important discussion. I wanted to ask on whether if a leader has got on whether a leader is to get opinions from the team, but the team contribution is not aligned with what maybe the leader expects. If she imposes, would that be emotionally unintelligence, or it could be termed as something else? I'm going to ask you, Venus, to probably talk into this in a situation where you're trying to involve everyone, but they're not aligned. And then you try to say, okay, eventually you impose your opinion on them.
Again, thank you. Thank you for the question, my friend. Yamuremye, you said?
Yes, Yamuremye.
Thank you for the question. Again, it comes to what I started with. Self-awareness, clarifying your mission. I was referring to a person himself when he's reading the mission within him, but within an organization, once you create a company or once you join a company, do you take time to understand what is the mission? A simple question I can give to everyone here. If you were to be asked, the company you work in, what does it produce? What is the product your company does take to the customer for exchanging with the money they get from them? It may be easy if you have a factory because it is manufacturing tangible things. But in service, which is the case most of the time in many organizations are now service-oriented. But if you ask, if a company has 10 people and you ask each one to describe the product the company is selling, I'm afraid that you may get 10 different answers. This comes to the clarification. You as the leader, you must start by that. You must start the awareness of the company. What is the purpose? What does it deliver? Most of the time you would find that the reason people would come with suggestions which are not aligned is because they have not been taught what is the purpose of the company, or there's some confusion. So the clarification is the key. And if someone within the organization, despite the clarification, because here we are talking about emotional intelligence of leaders, but also we are talking about emotional intelligence of the employees. Some employee may have a low EQ that he doesn't catch up. Because sometimes we tend to look on top, but everywhere we may have someone who is toxic within the organization. His EQ is so low that he tends to pull others down. Then you as a leader, you need to make sure you need to identify that person, you talk to him with empathy, you coach him. But if he is not following, you need to take a decision. This is what I can say about that thing.
Thank you. Again, it's the onus is on the leader to make a decision in that particular situation. And Angela, do you have something to add on that before we can transition?
Yes, sure. So just to clarify that in no way are we suggesting, or am I suggesting that a leader always has to consult, right? The emotionally intelligent leader knows how to apply what we call situational leadership. There is a time as a leader where you want to be democratic, and hopefully a democratic and collaborative approach is what you will use because it's the least threatening of the leadership styles. But there is a time and a place where a democratic and collaborative approach in your leadership does not work. When there is a crisis, it's not the time to ask people, what do you think? You as the leader must step up to the plate because there could be reputational damage to the organization, there could be financial damage, there could be injury to persons. So as a leader, it's when you're emotionally intelligent, it's to understand in what situation am I going to create that opportunity for collaboration and brainstorming. Many times you want to do that because there is a problem in the organization, there's a problem maybe in a particular process, and you want people to take ownership and to feel they're part of the solution. Then there are other times, for example, the company shareholders or the board of directors come with a particular directive. They're not negotiating. They're the people whose equity has been put in the business. So they're not negotiating. So not everything is up for negotiation. Not everything is up for brainstorming. Now, you are an emotionally intelligent leader when you know in which situation do I apply what kind of leadership.
Excellently put, excellently put. So emotional intelligence is a tool to apply. It's just a matter of knowing when to apply which tool and when to apply situational leadership. I love what you said about situational leadership because as a leader, your job is to know when to apply what, when to do what. And that's why you're hired as a leader, or that's why you're in that situation to figure out the challenges and that face the company. Thank you so much, both of you, for those sufficient answers. There's a comment. Thank you so much, Vincent, for reminding us that it's probably better for us to look at the benefits of having EQ as opposed to looking at the cost of EQ being a little bit negative from my end. Kalma Buka is, of course, another familiar name in the Toastmasters fraternity in Rwanda. He says that thanks, Angela. Research has shown a customer that has a good experience brings 4 more customers. A customer that receives a traumatic experience takes away 9 potential customers from that business. So it's surely looking at it from an angle of customer experience and how if we can apply, if we can be a little bit more emotional intelligence, we could attract more, 4 more customers, or perhaps we could have 11 customers. What? My mathematics is actually not good. You can have 13 customers in just one go instead of losing all of them. So there we have it. It is our opportunity. It is the onus is on us, our duty to find and decide when to apply what, but most importantly, we have to show up on each work day ready to be emotionally intelligent and get the wins we can actually amass. Benjamin says, well said, Angela, the cost of low EQ can be that big sometimes. Then we have Victoria Munguti, who says that in service, we produce value to our clients. So Venus, I like the empathy point you brought across, because I believe that the best mirror to reflect your leadership ability is EQ, and EQ is the people you lead. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Victoria. My friends, we are coming to the end of our conversations, but we cannot all talk about doom and gloom. I want to ask you, what can we do? Assuming there's a business leader, there's an employee, there's someone at the end of this conversation who's like, okay, I get it. I now know what emotional intelligence is. I now know the benefits and how to go about it. The cost to it. How do I go ahead, either as an organization to foster learning of emotional intelligence, or as an individual, what can I do to be more emotionally intelligent? Angela, do you want to start for us on this?
Sure. Yes, absolutely, Joshua. So as an individual, what can I do with this information? Mm-hmm. The information is empowering you to know that every day and in every circumstance, the power is always in your hands to choose whether to react or whether to respond. Let's take a typical situation when we are not under lockdown. Between leaving your home and getting to work, a whole host of things could have happened. If you use public transport, and in Kenya, in Nairobi in particular, sometimes what we call the mini vans, we call them matatus. Some of those guys are rough. So they're enough to set you on a bad mood on a Monday morning when it is raining and on your way to the bus stop. Joshua drove past in his car, didn't care, and drove past a puddle. And so here you're going to work with stained clothes. You see, that has happened. And I'm not saying you should just say all is well. You're human. But do you take a pebble and stone Joshua's car? Do you come to the office, in a bad mood when somebody says good morning to you, you say, what's so good about the morning? Or do you recognize that between leaving my house and getting to the office, man, this morning has not started well. So let me go to work. Let me just go to work. Maybe let me stand on that balcony or hang out before I get into that open plan where there's this mass of humanity, and just take in some deep breaths and then choose to not bring your emotions to that open plan space. Because remember, if everybody in that open plan was to bring all the emotions, the fights that you've had with your better half the night before, the babies who've been crying the whole night because they're little, they've not yet adjusted to their sleeping patterns, the house help who waits for you on Monday morning to tell you, I quit. If all of us was to bring this into the office, the organization would turn into a war zone. But what we choose to do every day is to exercise the power of choice, the choice to respond rather than to react. At an organizational level, what I would say is that let's make sure that a course in emotional intelligence is one, part and parcel and mandatory in any leadership training course. Secondly, in the induction programs of any new employee, it doesn't matter whether you are the clerk in the mail room. Let's make sure that in our organizations, we create that culture of emotionally intelligent people. When you come, that first week or 2 weeks when you're learning about the organization, its values, and getting to know people and what your specific role will be, let's input emotional intelligence there. Because if people are not aware, they will continue to do what they've always done in response to anger, in response to divergent views. So that's a very quick and ready application that I would offer.
Thank you so much for very helpful nuggets. And I believe that we will borrow from your wisdom when faced with situations that you've elaborated earlier on. Venuste, any additions to how we can grow our emotional intelligence?
Thank you, Joshua. I will go back to one of the session previous, or the first one, when we define what is emotion. Because we are talking about emotional intelligence, but it's an intelligence connected to the emotions a person is expressing. We observed that the emotion is a visible part. It's a visible expression of one's inside. And that inside, you can say, there are three components. They are like a kind of cycle. You start by a thought, and that thought would generate a certain emotion, and that emotion will lead to certain actions. So those three components: thought, emotions, action. When you see a person with a certain emotion, you can anticipate what the action is going to take. If I meet you, Joshua, in the morning, you are not the kind of, if I greet you, I know you're going to say, yes, good morning, and so on. But there's some people, when you greet them and say, you can anticipate, is the person you're going to stay with? So how now to encourage, how to develop this component, this emotional intelligence? Because within an organization, we don't see the thought of people. You can't see my thought, but you can see the actions. Get people within your organization busy. Make sure everyone knows what he has to do. Make sure everyone knows what he has to produce. And this is again to recognize one of the comments of the audience about the positive reward. Most of the time when we are looking at a situation, we tend to see, they were saying about the cost, the negative side to be, and you need also, if we need to develop a good emotional intelligence within the company, to reward, to recognize those who are producing. Imagine a day, I'm inviting everyone to do a kind of self-analysis. In the morning, put up a target. Say it's a thought. Put up an intention in the morning. You say, this morning, I have an intention to deliver this. You may do it if you are praying, or you may even not do it when you are, but set that intention and do it willingly and intentionally. And at the end of the day, do a kind of feedback. Say, was my intention fulfilled? Recognize what has been fulfilled and learn from what has been not achieved. And by doing that continually, and you can do it within the organization systematically as well, by doing that, you are encouraging production. And the production is going to be the source of morale within your company. And the morale, if the morale increases, this is when the good emotion will come in, and this retroactively, people will have good thoughts.
Wow, interesting. And Venuste has spoken from, again, a leader's perspective. I have personally had the opportunity of interacting with some of your staff, and I can clearly see the thought process into that. And I've also interacted with Angela enough to know, at least in her training business, that this is a very important quality that you uphold in across board all your trainings. And people of different walks of life. I want to thank you so much, my wonderful panel, for the powerful message you've shared. I have a few comments on the chat before we can actually close in. We have Carl who says that learning earlier on, I asked, what could we do to improve our emotional intelligence? And then Carl says, learning to respect other people's views, even when you might not necessarily agree with them, is a very good place to start. And you go ahead to say, Carl, that listening is a powerful tool in your EQ arsenal. Learn to listen to understand rather than to listen to respond. Also recognize that it's okay to agree. It's okay to agree to disagree, and do so respectfully. I love your perspective. Benjamin says, Benjamin Nawara says, self-awareness and understanding others, I think, is a key to improving one's IQ. Absolutely. Then Christine Mutoni says, well put, Angela and Venus. EQ is a skill that is continuously improved and one that every leader should possess. A leader can get away without intelligences, other intelligences, maybe yes, other intelligences, but should definitely have EQ. Christine comes again to say, very informative session. Thank you for sharing. Vincent comes again to say, thank you, Angela, Joshua, and Venus, for taking us through this, what was remaining of the complex subject. Great to see EQ in action in Africa. Keep it up. Thank you so much, Vincent Kijuka, for your comments and for being here. Thank you each and everyone that was part of this conversation. If you're here for the first time, please do subscribe so that you always get notifications to have more conversations of the kind. We will definitely every 2 weeks bring to you interesting conversations about how we can develop our leadership skills and communication skills. You heard it from Venus. There are 3 roles of a leader: communication, communication, and communication. So we are here to constantly bring to you more views on how we can build our communication abilities. Finally, we have Victoria Munguti again, who comes to say, thank you, Angela, for pointing out the defensive measures of the bullies. It was informative. Asante sana. I think this was particularly for you, Angela. Thank you so much once again. If you are again visiting for the first time, do leave a comment in our comment section. And if you have a friend or two that you like to recommend this conversation and you feel they would benefit from it, we love to share. And you know they say that sharing is indeed caring. So go ahead and share this information so people can actually learn a thing or two about emotional intelligence and how best they can be excellent leaders and, of course, team players in whichever teams they are. We thank you so much for being part of this evening. My name is Joshua Tainduka. It's been a great joy and honor to be your host. And this, my friends, is the Speaker's